The August core update has now finished rolling out and SEOs have reacted in their usual cool, calm manner. Hello and welcome to the Canonical Chronicle, the meme-infused SEO news that stops your rankings from tanking. In this week's episode we will discuss the August 2024 core update, Google's response from Danny Sullivan, and also a very interesting brand study by Moz. But there's some things that we're not going to discuss. For example, Mediavine banning publishers are using AI, a WordPress breach that's affected 6 million websites, Google saying that spam scores are kind of insignificant, WordPress hardening security for millions of plugins and themes, and also some updates to Google Trends. All of these updates are available in a handy slide deck which we've made available for free in the link down below, or if you go to typemedia.net. So, without further ado, let's get into it. This week, Danny Sullivan, the Google liaison, took to LinkedIn, presumably because LinkedIn has the same vibes as Google Plus did, and he made a post to update us on things that are happening internally at Google around the core update. And the three things he said could essentially boil down to: we care about the little guy, just make great content, and don't do anything radical to try and affect your rankings. Just create great content. Now, where have I heard that before?
Hey everybody, Matt Cutts here.
Now, although a lot of what Googlers say can sometimes sound like a bit of a word salad that even politicians would be proud of, let's just park the cynicism for just a second and actually dive into what they've been saying, because actually there's a good few gems in there. In particular, he alluded to content changes you could make. He kind of went into EEAT a little bit more without even really realizing it. He also mentioned what happens if you move from like position 1 to position 2 and a bunch of other things. In particular, he alluded to some content changes you could make, some things around EEAT, and also like the major changes that the ranking algorithms have undertaken in the March core update that we're now seeing in this August core update as well. So first, let's look at content. So Barry Schwartz of Search Engine Roundtable was interviewing Danny Sullivan, and one of the questions he asked him was around content marketing as it pertains to a local plumbing website. Barry was essentially asking, like, look, this plumbing website has got all of the content absolutely perfect, but it doesn't rank. Why is that? And Sullivan said something really interesting. Sullivan said a lot of the traffic that a local plumber was getting probably wasn't even something that was converting to them. In contrast, if that plumber shared really professional and personal stories about plumbing issues in their local area, that would be more something Google would want to reward. So when he mentions personal and professional stories, that very much sounds like EEAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust, in particular, experience. So instead of writing some generic plumbing content that some AI could easily write, you need to write content that's actually from the plumber's point of view, that's a real personal story or a case study. For example, talk about that time you fixed Mrs. Olsen's leak in that classic plumber tone of voice.
I don't give a fuck what you're doing, Mrs. Olsen. I'm just trying to fix the fucking leak.
When it comes to core updates, some of the most frustrating things to happen isn't when your site is completely wiped out, although that is objectively terrible. It's actually when you've been holding position 1 for a really long time, then the update happens and position 2. So Danny Sullivan also mentioned something about this. He said, if you move from first to second, that can be a notable traffic impact. That's what happens. It doesn't mean that we don't like your content. We clearly do like your content. That's why you're in the top results. But it's going to be hard for you to then regain all that traffic back because of something else ranking higher, which is still useful to people as well. And overall, if everything is useful to people on search, then overall everybody gains. What? So what I get from that is that even if someone overtakes you on position 1, don't worry, Google still loves your content, you're great, you're doing nothing wrong. Which sounds suspiciously like you versus the other guy she says not to worry about. So when we dig into what he says about losing traffic from position 1 to position 2, we can read between the lines and see it's almost definitely because of user-related signals, and that is how people are interacting with your result inside of the SERP itself. So if you're losing a single position at the time of a core update, firstly, I wouldn't do anything until it's completely rolled out, but once it has, look at things that affect how you're presented inside of the SERP. So page titles, meta descriptions, schema markup, do you have a knowledge graph, all of these things to differentiate yourself from the 10 blue links that are usually on the first page of Google. Google also mentioned a new debugging document that they've created in order to help site owners when there's a core update. And some of the more interesting things in there pertain to things like forums and social sites, which we're just going to get into in a second. So one of the things that Danny Sullivan mentioned was he said that the March update was a big deal because it changed the system that they use in order to do the actual ranking of pages. In particular, he said, and our ranking systems are different, and among other things, our ranking systems are also rewarding other kinds of content too, including forum content and social content, because that's an important part of providing a good set of diverse results. So what do you know? Even the algorithm has a DEI policy, and apparently diversity is in.
Diversity can't be in, okay? Because otherwise, God forbid, that means one day it might be out.
You heard it here first. Next week, diversity could be out.
Now, all jokes aside, this is kind of how it's always been. A particular SERP rarely stays the same over time. Usually you get your 10 blue links, but depending on what's happening in the world, those 10 blue links can turn into news carousels. Those news carousels can then have video in them. Those videos can then turn into a knowledge graph, like all for the same keyword over time. So this is going to happen more and more. So we have to have a think, well, how can we stabilize our traffic and take advantage of this ever-changing SERP feature? And that's what we're going to go into just now. So firstly, let's look at the facts. We know that the world lives on social media, and we also know that in 2017, Google struck a deal with Twitter in order to start ingesting the Twitter fire hose and showing that on search. So it's highly likely that Google's algorithm actually looks at things like social shares and popularity as part of a wider view to try and understand brand popularity. So if you've been negatively affected by the core update, truly look at your content and see, does this actually do well if I was to put it onto social? And for a lot of us, the answer is probably, well, no, not really, because it's like a product page or something like that. But if you think about some of the blog and news content that you're creating, and then you think about what you said earlier about personal stories and anecdotes, if you're to build that into your content and share that, the story about the plumber who went to Mrs. Smith's house to fix her leaky tap, although it's still boring and won't do that great on social versus everything else that's out there, will do way better than something that some random copywriter's done about like how to fix a leaky tap. So when it comes to editing some of your content, try and change it slightly so that some of it feels a bit more like a case study and a first person perspective, and try and pepper in things like quotes and real life anecdotes. That's going to give it that flavor of EEAT that Google are looking for. So next is page experience and UX. So Barry actually pushed this quite hard in an interview and asked specifically about sites with lots of ads inside of the content. And the response was a very kind of frustrating Google response. In particular, he said, I would just reiterate to people, when you look at a page, if you were coming into it as somebody for the first time, would you feel like you're having a satisfying experience? A satisfying experience? What is a satisfying experience? That to me sounds like a code word someone uses in a massage parlor.
Now, I don't know if there's some kind of special code I'm supposed to say.
Oh, no, you have a whole package, that's all.
So the satisfying experience can really just be seen as create good content, which is extremely frustrating advice to have, because as far as you and I are concerned, we are creating good content. So all of my SEO cynicism aside, I do think the Google engineers are trying to surface more high quality content from independent websites, and they're definitely trying to demote anything that feels like it's just been made for search, which in itself is not useful to you. But if I was to give you some examples, For example, if you ever went on like a recipe site for some cupcakes and instead of just giving you the recipe, you get someone's entire life story about how their grandmother came from like the old country with this particular cupcake recipe, and then you have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll through something to eventually just get the recipe. They're trying to get rid of that. I mean, if you have like a product page about light bulbs and then you go into like a 3,000 word essay about Thomas Edison and the invention of DC electricity, they're also trying to get rid of that sort of stuff as well. And also just don't get me started on FAQs. I get it, they show up in the SERP so everyone's got them, but we probably don't need 10 FAQs of what is a cupcake on the cupcake recipe. Like, that's just not good for a user. The intent is they already know what the cupcake is and they want the recipe. They don't need 10 nonsense FAQs that some tool has created for you. So that's what not to do, but what should we actually focus on? Well, I'm now going to be the one that's giving you the frustrating, annoying advice. You want a fast load time, a coherent structure across the website, logical internal linking from articles and commercial pages, and then your basic trust signals like reviews, like schema, things like this. Ultimately, what I'm going to ask you SEOs to do if you want to do well is to leave optimisations on the table. So just because you can optimize it and you can do it, just because you can add that keyword, you can add that anchor text, you can add that FAQ, if it's not going to make the page any better, just don't do it. So now about the August update itself. Last week, we actually reported that most people are actually doing well out of it because people who were damaged in the September helpful content update last year are starting to see recovery. However, in a bit of a shock turn of events, we found that actually that is not the case at all, and a very, very small amount of people are actually recovering. So Barry Schwartz actually ran a poll at Search Engine Roundtable, and we found that 44% of people who responded said rankings are down, 27% of people said rankings are up, and the rest said they were the grand old Duke of York.
They were neither up nor down.
So as an agency, Type A Media have access to a lot of Search Console accounts, and it amounts to just over 10 million-ish keywords. And when we look at that across all of our clients, we can see, annoyingly, pretty much the same thing. Anecdotally, if I tell you the things that our clients have done who have done well out of this update, it's things like coherent structure, good content on the page, and really good solid link graph, which I appreciate is like the SEO version of me saying the sky is blue and the grass is green. But when we dig into this a little bit more, we can actually kind of codify it as the websites with the best brand signals, which I'll get into in just a second, are the ones that seem to be doing the best. This observation has actually been corroborated by the mad scientist over at Moz, Mr. Tom Capper, who's actually done a really interesting, very heavily data-driven study comparing brand signals to DA and looking at how people have been affected in the helpful content update and subsequent core updates. The overarching theory can be summarized as the ratio between brand authority and domain authority. Essentially, the closer the ratio of one of brand and domain authority, the more likely someone is to do well out of a core update. So you might be asking, well, what is brand authority? Well, it's a Moz calculation, so we don't really know exactly what's in there, but we can assume it's things like social mentions will be in there, the amount of brand searches that are happening, how the SERP physically looks, if there's a knowledge panel or not, things like that will all add into the overall brand authority. So as SEOs, we want this to be codified into some things to just go and do. So here are like the 4 main things that you can go and do to affect this kind of brand authority if you're trying to recover from a core update or protect yourself from any future core updates. Firstly, I want you to think about entities and correlation between entities. So if you're Ford, the car company, the brand term you're looking for is Ford, but also F-150 and Focus are also your brand terms. So it's very easy to mark this up using schema so that we can wrap all of these brand terms together so Google understands inside of its knowledge graph what a brand or owned term is versus a generic term. Next, we want to have a look at the SERPs themselves, in particular click-through rate as it pertains to brand terms. So if you Google your brand name and variations of your brand name, does your maps listing come up? Does the knowledge panel come up? Do you get one big listing with lots of site links underneath it? Or is it just 10 blue links? If it's just 10 blue links, there's a lot of work to do with establishing yourself as an actual brand in the eyes of Google. When it comes to that sort of stuff, if you go to wikidata.org, type in any brand and see all of the identifiers and classifiers that Google are actually using to understand if an entity is a brand or not, that is a very good place to start and check against your own website. Next, we've got digital PR and mentions. So obviously links themselves are great. We want links, especially from high authority sources like the BBC, for example. But what if you're mentioned but there's no link? So interestingly, like Google knows that on a page, what entities are actually being spoke about on the page. So even if it's not a hard link, it is still going to be benefiting you if you're getting lots of mentions over time. Same goes for things like mentions in social media, shares, things of that nature. So next I want you to think about brand advertising. Now, all Google really wants to do is take whatever the offline power structure is and replicate it online. And all they're trying to do is marry up a set of generic keywords to whoever the best brand is for those keywords in 10 results on a search page. So think about it, if you're doing like TV, radio, out of home, or even just doing like some display advertising on Google's display network, what that's actually doing is it's sending people to your website, and we know for a fact that Google Chrome is being used and the clickstream data in that in order to affect the algorithm. So the more physical traffic that is coming to your site from lots of different sources, that plays into the algorithm as well. However, that is incredibly hard to manipulate as an SEO. So when it comes to the overall marketing mix, some sort of above the line traditional brand advertising, I think is key for SEO moving forward. That's everything for this week's Canonical Chronicle. If you want the deck that goes along with this to get all of this week's SEO news, go to typeamedia.net. Make sure you don't miss next week's video by clicking that subscribe button, and until next time, we'll see you later.